Today guys, I'm going to take you into the woods. We're going to cut a split top fir tree. Basically that's where two stems are growing together and they join at some point on the tree. These unions where they join can be anywhere from 10 feet off the ground all the way up to 50, 90 feet off the ground. And that also produces some challenges when you're following the trees. And we'll get into that here in a minute. Right now I'm just trekking through the woods. I'm going to get set up on this tree and figure out a game plan of how I'm going to follow it. So as I approached the base of this tree, I kind of sized it up, took a look at how tall it was, how big it was at the base, and it was about 5 feet on the stump. So this is definitely the type of tree you're going to want to get into your larger saws, a 90cc saw, something like that. This is a Husqvarna 395 I'm cutting with here. And that just gives me that added power and torque when I need it to get through these older, tough firs. Before I follow this tree, I'm brushing everything out. So I'm getting rid of all those little saplings, these little trees that are growing up around the stump. And that's just so I have an escape path to get out of there when these things start to go. You don't want to be socked in with a bunch of brush like this and trying to fall trees. You're going to end up tripping or getting caught up on something and you won't be able to get away from the stump fast enough. Here you're going to see me looking back and forth from the tree to my surroundings. All I'm doing is looking for a clear path that I can make to allow me to get away from that tree as quick as possible and create as much distance as possible when it starts to leave. Don't get complacent about making these avenues of escape and just say, you know, everything's going to be alright. This one's going to be okay. I don't need to have an escape route. These bigger trees will get you. Limbs will break out as they're coming down. The stem might get caught up on another tree and rotate towards you. So again, just make sure you're making those escape routes or at least visually looking for the clearest path for you to move through in case something does go wrong as you're cutting. If you noticed, I was tapping on the left side of the stem before I climbed up to start cutting it. I'm doing that to try and determine if there was any hollow sound in the tree and that it was in a significant stage of decay. That's critical, and that when you're putting in your face and back cuts, that you know a general idea of how much rot is in the interior of that tree so that you don't have something fail and the tree goes a direction you don't want it to. You can do a pretty good job by just pounding on it with your fist at times, but ideally pull your axe out and sound the tree by just tapping on it. You'll be able to tell over time what trees are in a significant stage of decay and have a lot of issues, and then you just adjust your face and back cuts accordingly. guys, as I was noticing movement in the top of the tree and I knew it was about to leave, I yelled timber. I did that because where the stem stretched out to wasn't far from the house. And there was contractors on site. The customer told me we're going to be there to do a bid on some concrete. And I didn't even know, but there was a little boy also that came with the contractors that was watching me cut this tree the whole time. I had no idea that he was over there near the house. So that's why you yell timber. It's easy for people to listen to the sounds of your saw as you're cutting and not realize a tree is actually starting to move and fall. You may hear the cracking and the breaking of the hinge where you're at, but the customer or people on site, they won't know that the tree's actually starting to leave. And if the tree isn't crashing through a bunch of brush and other trees on its way down, people will just think you're still cutting and making your face or back cuts. So they have no idea that the tree's actually starting to fall in their direction. So again, as soon as you see that movement start to happen and you know there's a potential for anyone to be standing in that falling path, make sure you're yelling timber or something just to get their attention so they look up. Alright, I took a quick break and I'm headed back down to that left stem now to get it on the ground. Instead of climbing back into a ladder again, I decided to go ahead and just cut this thing down the middle and take off that right section where that previous stem was that we just followed. This allows me to be in the safest position possible, which is cutting from the ground. Anytime you guys are cutting ladders or you're harnessed up and you're in there with your lanyard, there's always a potential of something going wrong and your chances of escape are far less. Whereas on the ground, you can gain a lot of distance quickly away from that stem to get yourself in a safe position if something does go wrong. It's hard to tell in the video here, guys, but this slope is pretty steep, so trying to stand on it was difficult. That's why I decided to opt for cutting this left side down, which would then give me the ability to come in for my back cut on this last stem from the ground and not have to climb up in there. It only took me a couple minutes, but it made it a lot safer for me to get this job done. If you guys have ever had to cut from the opposite side of the stump that you're used to, it can be a little bit awkward, right? So I'm used to cutting on the right side of the stump. That's just what I'm comfortable with. It's like being left or right-handed. But you really need to get outside your comfort zone and get used to falling trees on either side of the stump, because there are going to be jobs like this one where you're forced to cut from one side of the stump. And if you're not comfortable with that, it's going to be a bad day if you're trying to fall a tree and it has to be dead on and you've never practiced this method. So I encourage you, if you're out there cutting trees where it's not as big a deal if you're off by a little bit when the tree comes down, to practice, so when you are put into this position, you're not struggling and it's just second nature for you to move to the other side of the tree and put your face cut in.
God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth.